Welcome back to the Library Choice YouTube channel. Today we'll learn how to make this beautiful underbust corset with side cage hat. You can see how beautiful and lovely this is looking, and it is very simple to make. I used Ankara fabric, a black polished fabric as bias, and boning for this, so it's quite simple. This is what you would like to learn. Kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Back to the Library Choice YouTube channel. Today we'll be learning how to make, draft and sew an underbust corset, but this time around it will be having a side cage hat. Okay, so we already have a tutorial on how to draft an underbust corset and also a corset on the channel, so I'm sure we understand how I got my dart that I have here. So quickly, the difference is just that this is a full body. The one we usually do stops around the waistline, which is like a half scale bodice. So this stops on a full blouse length, which is the hip line measurement. So now I've done all this now. So remember, this is like an off shoulder, so I don't actually need this upper part of my bodice. So I'm cutting it out so that we can have a smaller space to work with. Okay, now so the next thing now is for me to create my cup for my underbust corset, and to do this on my bust point line, I'm just going to go up by 1 inch, and then on that line I'll go in by ½ inch, and then using my cuff I'm going to connect this to my underbust for the first side of my cup like this. So we have this. We just need the second side, but before I do the second side, I want to create the arc for my cage hat. Okay, so to create this arc now, on my hip line on the center front here, I'm going to go up by 2 inches, depending on the length of where you can even let it be on your hip line exactly if that is what you wish. So depending on how long you want your top to be, but for me I'll be going up by 1 inch, by 2 inches here, and then here remember the arc is going to come like this. So on my waistline here on the dart area, I'll go up by 2.5 inches on the first dart leg, and on the second dart leg I'll be going down, sorry, from my waist down by 2.5, and then on the second one I'll be going down by 2 inches, and then here I'm going to connect it to my waist measurement. This is my waistline. Let me make it bolder. So this here is my waistline. So now using my curved ruler, I'm just going to connect it first from my center front to my first dart leg here, and then from there to my waistline. Okay, if your ruler cannot take it all at once, then you do it in bits like I am doing. Okay, so now we have our hack there. So after creating this hack now, I can easily cut my dart, because I need to create the hack before I cut my dart. Remember that I need to close my waist dart and my bust dart before I'll be able to do the other half of my cup. So now that I have cut this off now, I can easily cut off my darts. So I've cut off this dart, and then I've slashed my bust dart also. So I'm just going to place it on it like this, and then I'll close the bust dart so that I can complete my bust cup. So after closing my bust dart now, I'll take my curved ruler and then create an arc for my bust cup like this. Okay, remember that the 1 inch that I took here is not limit. You can go up by even 2 inches. It doesn't have to be 1 inch. If you want the center to be reaching like almost your chest line, okay, so you can go up by 1 inch, then you go in by ½ inch, just like we did before you draw your bust cup, depending on whatever you need. And then remember, this is an underbust corset, so we don't actually need the cup. We just need our center front and our side front. So once I'm done with that, I can easily cut this out and then cut the other side, and then we have this for our front. So this is my center front and this is my side front. Okay, so by the time I'm joining this now, I'm going to, because I may have a shortage here, so when I want to cut it out, I'm going to try to blend it. You can either try to blend it here, or when you finish joining it, you can retrace it so that you have something even. Okay, so now the next thing for me now is to work on my back bodies. This is my back panel and I already drafted it also. Okay, so this is the upper part and this is the lower part. I'll be adding a corset lacing at the back of my corset. That was why I went in by 1.5 inch here on my zipper area. Okay, because I'll be using my highlight to add corset lacing to it. So I'll cut that off now, and then I have my actual back corset. Okay, this is the upper part here and this is the lower part and this is my dart. So now the only thing that I'm going to be doing to this is that the arc that I created for my corset, I'm going to be creating it for this also. So on the center front also, I'll be going up by 2 inches, and then here on the dart, the first dart leg, I'll be coming down by 2.5. The second one, I'll be coming down by 2 inches, and then I'm going to connect it to my waist. So using my curved ruler now, I'm going to connect from here to here, and then from here to the next one, and then finally to my waist. Okay, so I have my hack, and then I can also cut that out. Okay, so I can easily cut this out now. Okay, so this is my back, center back, this is the upper part, this is my side back. Then I'm going to cut out my dart also. So I'm going to try to blend the dart just like I did for the front bodies, so that they can match. Okay, so this is what we have now. This is our first pattern. Okay, so these are the patterns that we'll be working with. These are center front and side front, center back and side back. So you need to label it correctly so that you will not make mistakes, as they may look similar to each other. So now I'm going to take this to my fabric now and then cut my lining and my main fabric. Then when I'm cutting, I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to all of them round. And if you don't have allowance on your side seam already, you need to add your side seam allowance, whichever allowance that you wish. You maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches. So now I'll take this to my fabric now and then cut everything on my fabric. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut this on my fabric, and I added all my necessary allowances. Like I said, I added 1/2 inch round. So this is my center front, my side front, center back and side back, and I'll be using the same fabric for both main fabric and lining. So I cut 4 each for each fabric. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew them together like this, center front to side front, center back to side back for both front main fabric and lining. Then I'm going to add my boning to it. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew them together. Now you can see this is the center front for the first side, this is the center front for the other side. Okay, so I'm going to sew the center together also. Remember, they are separate like this. I'm going to sew the center front together like this also, and then these are the 2 back panels. So I'll do the same thing for the lining, and then I'm going to take it to the ironing table now and open my stitch so that I can iron it flat before I add my boning to my sewing dart lines. Okay, so to add boning to this, I'm going to measure the space I want to add the boning. Like I said, it's where I join my dart. So I'm just going to place my boning, and I will leave like ½ inch upward here and then ½ inch on the hem line so that I can turn it in. So once I mark where the boning will be, I'm going to cut it out. Now I'll be doing an outside boning. We've been doing different types of casing for a boning for our corset. Sometimes I'll open here and then put with the boning here, but in this case I'll be wrapping the boning with this fabric. So to do this now, I'm going to cut a fabric of like 1½ inch width, and the length will be around this side too, to just have like half inch upwards like that. So once I have it like that, I'll take it to the sewing machine. Now I'll place the boning like this, and then I'm going to sew it here on this white line here. I love to use regular boning a lot. This white line here is where I'm going to be sewing on, and there are several types of boning. There are some that are not sewable, like the normal plastic boning that you just need to create casing and then dip it inside. So I'll take this to the machine now and sew. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew it here, as you can see. So after sewing it, what I'm going to do is just to open this now and flip it over to the other side like this. You can see it is neat here. Then the excess that I have here, I'm going to fold it into two. Then after folding it into two, I'll fold it over the boning. Then I'm going to sew it. Okay, so I'm going to fold it over the boning like this, then I'm going to sew it, and that is what we'll have, something like this. You can see how neat it is, and that is what I'll be placing on my channel here. And then I'm going to sew it on it like this. Okay, so I've gone ahead to open up my stitches like this by ironing on it, so you can see how flat this is lined for me now. And remember, everything you are doing here, you have to repeat it on your lining also. So now the next thing now is for me to add my boning outwards like this, just the way I showed us. Okay, so I've sewn in the boning, and as you can see, you just need to place it on that line. Remember, you've opened the stitches, so it becomes easier for you. So you just place it on the dart line and then sew it tiny on both sides like this, so that it can stay. So this is my front and this is my back panel, and like I said, everything I did on my lining also. So these are my lining pieces. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to join the sides together. So I'm going to bring the center back, the side back and side front together like this, and then I'm going to sew it with my allowance, and then I'll do the same for the other side also, and also for my lining. Okay, so I've sewn this on the sides now, on the two sides, and this is what it is looking like. Okay, so this is the main bodice now, and remember, you can add more boning to this. I just followed my dart line in my case, but if you want more boning, you can add to the sides, you can add anywhere you want. So now the next thing for me now is to turn the upper part with lining. That is why I said your boning shouldn't reach here, you should leave ½ inch. So my boning does not reach this place because of the turning. So now to do this, I'm just going to place my main fabric against my lining like this. I'm going to pin it together and then take it to the sewing machine now, and then sew the upper part before we continue. Okay, so I've sewn the upper part now. The next thing is for me to notch it so that I can turn it out. Okay, so I've turned it out now, and you can see how beautiful it is looking. So for the underbust area to be more structured, I have this tiny boning. I'm sure if you watch my tutorial on underbust corset, all this will be familiar. Okay, so now I want to insert this tiny boning here. It's about ½ inch on the underbust corset. So you just measure the one that can go around like this, and then once you have it, you cut it out, and then I'm going to open it. Remember, I just closed the upper part, so I'm going to open it and try to slide it inside this boning part. Now once I slide it in, I'll push it inwards totally, and then I'm going to take it to the machine now and then sew it round just to hold it. So the boning is inside now. I'm just going to sew it very close to hold it together. So I'll do this for the two sides so that the underbust area also can be structured. So I've gone ahead to insert boning on the underbust area, and you can see how it's standing firm now. So the next thing now is to close up this, and to do that I'm simply going to place them against each other like this, and then I'm going to sew it round on the sides also, and then I'm going to leave a space to turn it out, which I'm going to be closing later. So before you do this now, if you wish to add another boning on this side of your, remember we are going to be adding an eyelet here, so you can add a boning also on this side of the center back, just to strengthen the eyelets. You know, a lot of activity will be going there. So I'm doing this for the purpose of the tutorial, that's why I'm not adding it. But if you're going to be wearing it, you may want to add maybe another boning around here before you turn it out. So I've sewn it round now, and then I'm trying to turn it out from the little space that I left. It may not be really easy to turn it out. This is the space that I'm turning out for, but it is possible. So you just need to be doing it gradually. Then after turning it out, we'll take it to the ironing table and then give it a good press. Okay, so you can also notch the curve areas that you may have to make the work easier for you. Okay, so I successfully turned out everything now, and this is the little space that I left. So now I'm going to be folding in the allowance, and then I'm going to be top stitching on this space to close it. Then I'll take it to the ironing table to give it a good press. Okay, so I've gone ahead to turn it out, and then I ironed it. You can see how flat and beautiful it is looking. So now the next thing for us now is to create our cage hat, and to do that I'm going to take the measurements of my hack here. Okay, so now the total measurement that I have here is around 19 inches. As you can see, I have around 19 inches here. So I'm going to be measuring the front and the back. Okay, so the front is from the center front here up to the side front, which is around 10 inches, as you can see, which means the rest will be 9 inches, meaning that the total is 19. So I'll be adding 1 inch seam allowance to it, and I'll measure 20 inches. Okay, so I'll take my paper now, and then I have 20 inches here. This is 20 inches by around 8 inches. It can be shorter depending on what you want. Okay, so now to divide the front and back, if you want excess on your back, you can just use the same thing, like divide it 10-10 for the front and back, but I want it to be exact, so I'll be using 10.5 for my front. Remember I added 1 inch allowance, that's half for each. 10.5 for my front, and then the back is going to be 9.5. okay, so I'll make this into a straight line, and then to make the hack on this side I'll go out by 2 inches, on this side also I'll go out by 2 inches, and then using the curved side of my ruler I'm going to be connecting it like this so that I can have a hack. So you need a really good curved ruler for this so that I can get something nice. So I have this now. The same thing I'm going to be doing on this side. So assuming I'm using the same thing for the front and back, I don't need to be doing front and back separately. I can just do it together. Then when I want to cut it, I'm going to put it on fold and then cut out the same thing. So I'm going to be labeling it back and labeling it front. So I'm just going to try to smoothen it out here because I don't want it to be too sharp. Okay, so now I'll cut this out. Okay, so now I have this now. What actually makes the cage hat stand is the boning that we are going to be adding. So we'll be adding boning to this, and to add my boning you can add as much as you want. I'm going to be having a boning at the center here, and then I'll add 2 each on both sides. So you can just measure it then and divide it equally to know how to place your boning. Okay, so I have one there. You can have 3, but let me just have 2. So I can do like 4 inches interval or 3 inches interval, or let me do 3.5. Okay, so I have 3.5 inches interval here, and then here I'll do the same thing, and then I'll make it into a straight line. Okay, so the same way I wrapped my boning for my underbust corset is the same way I'll be adding boning to this also. So I'm just going to do the same process. I'll cut this on my fabric now, and then I'll go ahead to add my boning to it. The same process that I followed in adding boning to my underbust corset. Okay, so for the hack, I've notched my lines where I want my bonings to pass through vertically, and then I've already wrapped my boning with black fabric. So the next thing I'm just going to do is to start placing them on it like this, and then I'll sew it on both sides. But remember that I'm still going to be adding boning to this side and this side, so whatever you're adding here, make sure that it's not too long so that you have enough room to add casing for your boning, because I'll be using this type of boning for that side because it's the regular boning, and I'll be adding a casing to add it. It's quite stronger than this is a plastic boning. You can also on this one, and it's stronger than the regular boning that we enclosed here. So that's why I prefer to use it for this side and this side, so that the hack can be really formed. And I would have even used it for everything, but I don't have enough, so I'll be using regular boning for the vertical part, but for the outer here and this side I'll be using this plastic boning. So now I'll take this to the machine now and start sewing my boning to it one after the other. So I've sewn in the vertical bonings like this, as you can see, and I also created a channel for my boning. So when I was cutting this, I made sure I cut it on bias. Remember, this is a curve, and then I just sew it in a way that these rough edges will be concealed, as you can see, and then I used it to create my casing. So now I'm going to be inserting this plastic boning inside this, like I said, because it is harder than the regular boning, so it will make my hack stand better. Okay, I'll be inserting it inside this. That's what the casing is for. So but before I do that, I'm going to create a casing on top of this place also. Okay, and I'm also going to be creating it in such a way that it's going to conceal these rough edges for me, reminding myself that I'm still going to be attaching this to my main bodies, so you need to leave that allowance. Okay, so now I'll take this to the machine now and then create this casing. So while creating the casing, I'm going to close up completely one end of this side like this. I'm going to close it up, then my boning will stop around here, but on the other hand I'm going to leave it. So after inserting my boning, that is when I'm going to close it up. Okay, so like I said, I've created the channel for the upper part also, and I finished it neatly. As you can see here, there's no rough edges again. So now the next thing for me now is to insert my boning into the lower part and the upper part. Okay, so through the casing that I have, I'll just keep pushing it in. The boning is quite strong, so you can see how it's folding already. Okay, so when it gets to the ending here, I'm going to push it harder, and then I'll cut it off. So you can see that it's forming our hack for us already. So after putting it, you can see that I left space enough for passing a boning to my upper part also. So now I'll take the rest of the boning and then I'll start inserting it to the upper part through the casing that I have also. and then you can see what we have. So you can see what our hat is looking like now. You can see that it is already formed. So now I'm going to also cut off around here, then I'm going to neatly close it up. So I'm going to cut off the pony, and then I'm going to conceal these rough edges neatly, okay, so that I'll have something neat. Then we are done with our cage hat. Then I can now attach this to my bodice. Okay, so now the next thing is for me to add this to my main bodice. I've added one. This is the second one. So to add this, remember that we created the casing. If you look at it very well, you will see a seam line here. So this allowance that I left is what I'm going to be using to sew it, and you can see that I've neatly finished it both in and out. I ran out of black thread, that's why I used this white thread to finish it up, okay. And you can see that it is neat. So your cage hat needs to be neat like this. Then I'm going to flip this over now, and then from the center front I'm just going to place it like this, and then sew it all the way to the back. And then we can now add our lacing to the back, but to the center back here, and the underbust corset is ready. Okay, so this is what our underbust corset looks like after attaching it to the side. You can see how beautiful and lovely this is looking. And you are not limited to this type of cage hat. You just need to follow whatever style you want. If you want it extending beyond your underbust corset, you just need to increase the measurement that you used for creating your cage hat. And you can see that it is standing really well, and it is really so you can beautify this anyhow you want. You can have trimmings or beads, or okay, I have this beaded fringe. You can either place it on the hatch area here. You can see how beautiful it looks, or you can even place it on the hemline here. You can gum it or try to sew it by using hand stitches. So whatever it is that you wish to do with this, you can do it. It's very trendy and really beautiful.